everybody. Welcome back to Wisconsin Weather Experts, a Friday edition. We've made it to the end of the work week.
That's right. And a lot of folks, of course, want a really nice forecast because there'll be some viewing parties. I mean, this could be it. It's do or die for the Brew Crew. A lot of folks will be in the backyard, and it does look pretty good for at least a few hours. We'll have our regional and our long-range outlook coming up in just a bit. But no matter how the Brewers do, and no matter how things play out weather-wise, we really can't complain because other parts of our country have been hit very, very hard. That's where we start our news roundup here. Final push of a typhoon hit Alaska last weekend. Rescues continue in flooded areas with planes and helicopters airlifting residents. Nearly 1,500 people had to be brought to shelters, while at least 3 are dead or missing. Residents say the storm washed away a large part of their communities. State officials are working hard to find temporary housing as more storms are looming. Now, for some, this all came just a little bit too little and a little bit too late. One resident could just look at this video. They just had to sit and watch as their house was swept out to sea. The storm displaced 1,000 residents, as we said there. At least 3 people, again, are dead or missing, but more than 24 were rescued. Some good news there. Many of those are staying in shelters tonight, but rebuilding could take a long while, particularly with winter on the way, and we're talking about winter in Alaska.
Yeah, and it's the aerial views too are so sad.
It's stunning. It really
is. And you hate to use that word because normally that's explaining something that's beautiful, but it's just, I mean, it kind of takes your breath away.
It does, and not,
unreal.
Again, not in a positive way. It's just unbelievable to see the amount of area in Alaska that is covered. Alaska, massive part of our country, biggest state, right, by landmass, but just completely covered. These poor communities are really going to be suffering for quite some time. Now, from water to fire.
Yeah, fire crews used a big wheel to safely bring someone down to rescue them and bring them to the hospital. This was happening hours after the Echo Canyon Trail was shut down due to erosion from storm damage. Now, hikers are advised to head to other popular trails that remain open. It is unclear how long the Echo Canyon Trail will be off limits. So clearly a sign there that if someone needed to be rescued, that it is not meant to be used at the moment.
The erosion apparently for that trail in those areas was incredibly bad, and that obviously is why they closed it up and had to use the fire crews out there to get that rescue. And then now an actual fire for the first time in 6 weeks. All evacuations have been lifted for the Labor Mountain Fire burning near the Blewett Pass northwest of Cleum. This is in the northwest there, Pacific Northwest. The 42,000 acre fire is now 30% contained. These are photos from last month that we're looking at right there. Look at that massive fire. Fire crews say the recent rain and the snow has helped, and of course it's dampened the fuel for the fire, but there is still some activity as some of those items dry out with the weather, where there could be some more problems there as well.
And how about this too? So new technology could soon help make an impact on reducing the risks of wildfires. This, as researchers say, power lines have been linked to the cause of recent major fires in both Hawaii and in California. Now, researchers at Arizona State University are testing out sensor technology called WARM to turn power lines from an issue into a solution. The sensors detect factors that can start wildfires, such as changes in wind, temperature, and humidity. The sensors look to balance reducing fire risk from power lines with the need for always having access to electricity. I'd have to imagine that's a huge study, but if successful, very beneficial.
Right. I mean, the more data they have, the better they can get and maybe get out ahead of the problem, or at least get to it before it gets completely out of control. So what a great way. And we know that a lot of the power companies have been either directly or indirectly linked to some of the problems with these wildfires. So I applaud that they're trying to become a part of the solution too.
Yeah, I agree, 100%.
All right, well, we want the solution for our backyard watch party, weather-wise today. What do you think?
It's a big day. Today in Milwaukee specifically is is looking warmer, but it's also looking windy. But keep in mind, temperatures in the 70s, I mean, this is way above average for this time of year. So even though we've got some cloud cover and some wind, it's still looking pretty good really across the state of Wisconsin. We are still watching a storm system in our vicinity. You can see the cold front draped across Minnesota, actually another system extending down into the southern plains as well. Finally quiet along the west coast, aside from a new system coming in off of the Pacific into the Seattle area and the Pacific Northwest. It really is the Great Lakes region and Upper Plains dealing with the majority of the activity across the country right now. So our neck of the woods actually dealing with some of that activity. Now, there isn't a ton of rain out ahead of that cold front just yet. We will continue to see more development throughout the remainder of today and through the night. It is still going to be a bit unsettled for the state of Wisconsin through the next couple of days. So specifically for Friday, especially in southern and eastern parts of the state, we're looking dry. But then Saturday morning, as well as especially Sunday morning now, looking a little bit rainy in a handful of spots as that system rolls on through. Right now, there are a few showers trying to hold together in northern and northwestern parts of Wisconsin. These are actually tracking up towards the north. That's actually right ahead of that cold front, or out ahead of that cold front. We will likely see this line filling in at some point today, and that's what we could potentially see through the night tonight. But this is a very slow moving cold front, so it is going to take some time for it to completely clear Wisconsin, which is why we do have pockets of rain in the forecast both Saturday as well as Sunday. By Sunday afternoon, we're drying things out across the entire state, but it is going to be very windy, even windier than today, and it's also going to be a bit cooler, to say the very least. Now, for the rest of your Friday, there's just the chance this afternoon for a few pop-ups north. Otherwise, we'll start to see more filling in later on tonight, but even that looks to be pretty scattered. Notice by early Saturday morning, eastern Wisconsin, the better chance for some showers, and then we may actually have some decent dry time statewide throughout the second half of Saturday. So not expecting washout conditions whatsoever for the weekend ahead. Now for Sunday, notice how we see a batch of rain moving in from the south, but also the west. So this is going to impact likely the entire state at least some point Saturday night into Sunday morning. Eastern Wisconsin will likely see it the first half of Sunday. And this could be, more of that steady, somewhat soaking rainfall. A lot of what we've had as of late, it's been very light. This may be just a touch heavier, but still a really beneficial rain. It should clear our area by midday. Then we'll see some sunshine eventually, but it is going to be a much cooler Sunday afternoon behind that cold front. Saturday and Sunday look like very different days, temperature-wise, going from 70s down to 50s, at least for those of us in southeastern Wisconsin. Now, south of us, the system south of us, looking to be a little stronger. There is a marginal threat for some severe weather today, we'll say from Kansas City down into Oklahoma. And then notice how it really expands for the first half of the weekend on Saturday. Now, this does not include any part of Wisconsin, but notice this is a large area extending from parts of Ohio as well as Indiana all the way down into Texas as well as Louisiana, and right there in the middle in yellow, actually level 2 slight risk for some severe weather. The Storm Prediction Center has been highlighting this area pretty much all week long for the potential of some strong to severe weather for Saturday. So we'll be watching areas south of us. Unfortunately, they may be dealing with some severe weather, especially later in the day, and we haven't talked a lot about severe weather as of late. So that threat returns, but again, not for Wisconsin at all. And then notice for Sunday, as that system starts to make its way north a little bit more, a marginal risk for portions of Pennsylvania, western New York, Ohio, the Virginias. So it'll just eventually work its way up towards the northeast. Now, when it comes to temperatures, we are going to continue to warm up from here, even with the cloud cover. It's actually all thanks to that southerly breeze. So most of southern Wisconsin, but potentially even up towards the north, will likely see some 70s today. We're going to stay pretty mild tomorrow too. So 2 straight days likely in the 70s. But then you'll notice after that cold front passes for Sunday, we are going to drop quite a bit, potentially into the 50s, climbing nicely then for Monday back above average. And then we're going to settle back to those slightly cooler than average temperatures in the 50s, both Tuesday and Wednesday. So I would say if you like the 70s, try to enjoy them both today as well as tomorrow. Now I'll leave you with the wind because we do have a handful of blustery days ahead. Starting today, we could see those gusts really in the coming hours, anywhere from 25 to maybe even 30 miles per hour. But I'll stress Sunday is actually going to be a bit stronger. So we'll be watching that wind potential and then even a few days next week behind that storm system. system. Could be a little windy.
Right, and it's a warming wind today, but once it shifts, and then that blustery wind and like 58.
Sunday's going to feel different. It's very different.
It is October, it is Wisconsin, and you know what, getting 70s one day and 50s the next day. I'd like to say that's uncommon, but it happens quite a bit. You've got to keep...
there's no snow in the forecast.
That is true. Touch wood, Stephs, touch wood. Although there are folks out there begging for snow.
I know that is true.
I have a regular on my little Facebook chat every morning named Tommy, and he's always asking for snow. Middle of August, where's the snow? Well, none yet. We'll have to keep an eye out for that.
Soon enough.
Hey, remember yesterday we talked about the Phoenix Zoo and how it's been impacted by all the storms that they have had. We've got an update. The Phoenix Zoo is expected to reopen after the big microburst storm they had there. Nearly 24 trees were uprooted, pathways and fencing was damaged, and the 50-foot floating Christmas tree suffered major damage. The storm caused an estimated $300,000 in damages and closed the park for 3 days, which is during one of its busiest months as well. Wow. The 7,000-pound, 50-foot floating Christmas tree, which is an icon decorated with the zoo lights, it took a major hit.
They have attached some ropes to it. They will then pull it to the shore strategically and carefully. Then they will upright it using a crane. They will then lift it onto our lakeside lawn, where we will then assess the damage and see what needs to be done in order to fix this beautiful 50-foot tall floating tree.
I mean, wow.
Wow.
Look what it looks like right there.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Now, luckily, the damage isn't expected to impact the annual zoo lights, which is scheduled to open the night before Thanksgiving. The zoo is seeking donations and tree replacements through a new storm recovery fund to help rebuild and offset the lost revenue.
Also does include loss of revenue because we have been closed for 3 days in one of our busiest months of the entire year. This is prime season in Arizona.
All right, if you happen to have friends or perhaps family in that area and you'd like to help out, there is a link on our sister station website, fox10phoenix.com. Oh, looks like a beautiful tree when it's up and running. What a shame. And yeah, $300,000 worth of damage. Those poor zoo animals, they're going to be traumatized.
I know. I can only imagine. And such a beloved place, I'm sure, for a lot of locals. So we're hoping that they, get all the donations they need to have everything back to normal.
And we'll keep you up to date as we learn more. It's been kind of a fascinating story to follow. Hopefully you'll keep following us. We'll be right back with more Wisconsin weather experts. Welcome back to Wisconsin Weather Experts right here on Fox Local and the Fox 6 YouTube channel.
Have you ever wondered how we put together our weather forecasts? I'm sure you have. There's actually a lot more that goes into it than you probably think. Chief Meteorologist Tom Walks takes a deep dive into how we put together, especially our 6-day planner, and some of the tools that we use.
Well, I want to peel the layers back about how we forecast the weather, because you might just think, it's low pressure systems, it's cold fronts, it's warm fronts. It's actually a lot deeper than that. And by deeper, I also mean deeper into the atmosphere, because we're not just looking at what's going on here at the Earth's surface, but also what's above us. So when we start the forecast process, we usually start up at the top. It's a top-down approach to weather forecasting, and let me explain why. So here we are at jet stream level, about 30,000 feet in the atmosphere. And if you'll notice, that's also about airplane cruising altitude. If you notice when you fly and they say, hey, we're going to be cruising at 35,000 feet. Why do they cruise at that level? Well, the first level of the atmosphere closest to the Earth's surface is the troposphere. Then you have the stratosphere, which is above that. Well, the troposphere is where all the weather occurs. But once you get into the stratosphere, which is the next level of the Earth's atmosphere, the air starts warming. So you don't get cloud formation typically in the stratosphere, and the weather is a lot calmer. Skies are clear. So typically, airlines like to fly where the weather's quiet, right? Which is at the lower level of the stratosphere. Now that level can vary based on the weather, but again, it's roughly at 30,000 feet. So from a weather forecasting standpoint, this is where we start. And we are looking at the winds at this level. These are the jet stream winds. And the jet stream does a couple of things for us. Number one, it divides cold air to the north from warm air to the south. And number two, we really look at this as well for these dips or troughs of low pressure and ridges of high pressure. So if you'll notice on this map, there is a ridge of high pressure right over the upper Midwest. So this gives us a broad view of the general weather pattern. And again, here in the mid-latitudes, we have the westerlies. You may have heard of that before, where our winds are typically blowing from the west to the east. Now, of course, that's going to vary based on these troughs and these ridges. That in turn plays a role on how cold or how warm we get based upon that wind direction as well. All right, now I'm going to take you a little bit farther down to 18,000 feet. Now, why do we look at this particular map? Well, you might look in this and go, that's interesting temperature-wise, but actually these aren't temperatures. They're correlated, which I'll explain, but the colors that you're seeing here are called geopotential height, and these are the lines that you're seeing on here. What on earth does that mean? Well, as meteorologists, as we look at this, this is approximately 18,000 feet as to what we're looking at, but it's actually changing on here because this is really a pressure level of 500 millibars. All right, so typically on television, we talk about air pressure in inches, right? Inches of mercury. But in meteorology, we look at it as units of millibars. And so this is 500 millibars, which is approximately 18,000 feet, but temperature changes that. So, well, these heights are technically not temperatures. How it can be correlated is the higher these heights, the warmer the temperature. So what this means is where you're seeing these lines, these height lines, if you will, is the height in the atmosphere where you hit 500 millibars. So if you were to take a hot air balloon and go up and you hit 500 millibars, it would be at these particular height levels. And this is important because this goes back to what we talked about a minute ago with troughs of low pressure and ridges of high pressure. So we look at a map like this to continue to denote where these areas of low pressure are, and we actually dive even further into maps like this as well. Now I'm going to take you even lower. Remember this top-down approach, right? So now we're at approximately 5,000 feet, or otherwise known as 850 millibars. This is showing temperatures. And you'll notice it looks somewhat close to that map that I showed just a moment ago of that geopotential height. And I'm showing you this because you'll see that trough of low pressure with time. Eventually, you start to get that cold air coming in to the upper Midwest. And something else I'll point out about this, I will typically show this on the air, and we'll show this on the air to show temperature trends. And you might be thinking, wait a minute, why would you show temperature trends at 850 millibars, which is about 5,000 feet above our heads? Why would you show that for temperature trends and not at the surface? And the answer to that is because this map, because it's a little bit elevated in nature, is showing us the general air masses. It is not taking into account what we would call the diurnal temperature variations at the surface, meaning it gets colder in the morning, right, and warmer in the afternoon when the sun comes out. We don't see that on this map. So this is a better way to diagnose and prognosticate temperatures going forward because it doesn't have that morning cooling and afternoon warming, so we can go and look through the future like this to see the general temperature trends without that daily variation getting in the way. All right, now I'm going to take you down to the surface. So again, we started out way up there, right, at 30,000 feet. And now here we are at the surface. Now in this case, you can see a frontal boundary, a warm front that is set up here. But before I dive into this, I once had an email from a viewer, and it was very interesting because the viewer said, look, you don't always show fronts on your weather maps, and he was pretty upset about it, to be honest. I'm really upset that you're not showing frontal boundaries on your weather maps. And my response was twofold. Number one, sometimes fronts are not significant to the weather story. It might be a little bit of a wind change, but it's not overly significant, so it can lead to bad messaging, if you will. A cold front doesn't always mean a sharp drop in temperature, right? But number two, you can have storm systems and you can have rain without frontal boundaries. Why is that? That's because when we go back upstairs to 18,000 feet or to 30,000 feet, you can get these perturbations in the atmosphere. Think of it like a river, right? We talk about the jet stream being a river of air in the atmosphere. If there's a little rock, a little pebble that's thrown in there and you get that ripple effect, you get these little storms. They may be too small to form any fronts, but yet we still get rain from it because it's not just what's happening at the surface, it's what's happening above us as well. So that's why fronts, that's really almost the last thing that we look at because it's not always significant to the weather forecast. What's going on above us really is typically much more significant. Now, in this case, we do have a surface frontal boundary. So it starts, it forms way above us, and it builds down, right? And then you get this area of low pressure that develops. Now, these areas of low pressure develop from temperature differences way above us at the jet stream level. Those temperature differences lead to pressure differences, which leads to this area of low pressure forming. The Rocky Mountains in our country plays a big role in areas of low pressure developing. Why is that? And I'll get deeper into this likely in another episode, but as storm systems move east of the Rocky Mountains, well, they get crunched when they move over the mountains. When they come down, they spin faster, form these areas of low pressure. So the mountains play a big role for us. So then you have this warm front, which in this case turns into a stationary front. So that's why it looks a little different the farther south you go. That just means it's not moving for a time. It'll go back into that general warm front formation as it continues to move. And then you have a cold front farther off to the west. Now, warm fronts and cold fronts obviously do different things. Warm fronts will typically warm us up. It can also bring rain before it comes through. That's, again, another topic for another time. And then the cold front, that if it has a fair amount of cold air or less humid air in behind it, that would be what we call a dry line out on the plains. That causes the air to converge, causes the air to rise, and that's why you get showers and thunderstorms or snow along a cold front. So again, so many factors when it comes to weather forecasting, but the big takeaway here is it is a top-down approach. And I know folks might think, oh, weather forecasting, oh, it's easy. Nope, this is why This is why I have gray hair. There are so many factors when it comes to meteorology, and we're literally just scratching the surface a little bit. But again, often it's not about really what's happening here at the surface. It starts way above us.
All right, thank you for sticking with us here at the Wisconsin Weather Experts. It's been a wonderful, very busy week. We'll see you back on Monday.
Have a great weekend.